Let's talk about Colin Kaepernick. His Netflix scripted series, Colin in Black and White, is causing quite the controversy. In the first episode, the actor who plays the younger version of Kaepernick compared professional football's draft process to modern day slavery. Does Kaepernick have a point, or was that an unfair comparison? And have you watched the series? What are your takeaways? Listen, I have oftentimes myself compared football to the auction block, if you will, but nothing, let's be honest, nothing can really be compared to slavery in terms of the treatment, in terms of the pay, in terms of the inhumane way that slaves were treated. But let's talk about it, Dr. OJ.
Well, I think it does a tremendous disservice to understanding the legacy of slavery. I find it fascinating that here we are in 2021 still talking about the effects of slavery, from the trauma to Jim Crow to mass incarceration to white supremacy, and not to mention the wealth that was lost within the Black community. And for some reason, we compare that to professional football. Colin Kaepernick didn't get picked for the team because of his political policies. And as a result, he's got money, he's got endorsements, he's got Nike, he's got Netflix. Had that happened if he was around in the 1700s or 1800s and wasn't enslaved African Black man, he'd have been whipped, tortured, and killed in front of his family. And that's what we're saying is the same? I think this is the problem why people get so upset when somebody like Colin Kaepernick or an actor playing him can compare something that is tremendously egregious and has destroyed an entire community in this country versus a job where you get hit and you make millions of dollars.
Yeah. I think they refer to the trading and the buying and selling of the football players to the other teams with the football
players get money. The players make millions of dollars. Every single one of those star players has more money than I've ever made. That's for sure. More money than anybody enslaved ever made. Just because you don't like your job and you don't like the process in which your talents are changed to teams in cities doesn't mean it's the same thing as chattel slavery, where you are separated from your family, where your women are raped, where your children are beat, and your human dignity is stolen. These things are not the same, and Colin Kaepernick and the people at Netflix should be ashamed.
Alicia.
But what is the same is all the people in the power positions are white. I think it's one Indian guy or something that owns the team. All the power people are white, and all the people being employed to risk concussions are Black. And we know it's racist. They were turning down the Black folks' concussions, talking about they were born brain dead. Well, how the hell did the damn athletes learn the playbook? So we know that this is a bunch of crap. And that's where the similarities are. The people in the power positions are white, and the people running that football are Black. And yes, they are getting paid a very handsome wage, but it still has a lot of similarities. They are selling you and trading you. And yeah, I mean, of course, it's not the same as chattel slavery, but it has a lot of similarities.
Is it similar?
I agree with Alicia as well. The culture that I think is offensive and listen, they've modernized it, right? When you see the NFL draft, everyone has got, the slick uniform and it's a made for TV event. But lurking beneath the surface, there are a lot of the comments and innuendos that get made. I think we look to the John Gruden controversy as he was fired, as his 10-year-old emails surfaced, and the language and the epithets that he was using in those emails. All of that is still a part of the NFL process. To Alicia's point, there is a ruling class in the NFL, and what you end up seeing in this draft process is a similarity to the auction block. It's not the exact same, but there are a lot of similar traits to it.
Dominique.
Well, Colin Kaepernick is not the first person to make this analogy. There was a book called $40 Million Slave that was written about the NFL. And obviously it's an analogy. He doesn't mean it's exactly the same as chattel slavery, but I do think it's worth pointing out that most of those athletes will never make a lot of money. And what he was talking about specifically was the combine, where they are looked into like horses and traded and commented upon as physical specimens. And it is true that this is, they're bought and sold and traded. It is true that most people, when you look at the trajectory of a career, the average football player really doesn't make that much money. The Colin Kaepernick, the big money ticket athletes are few. And I think the dynamic of ownership and the fact that the NFL, is a nonprofit organization run by a bunch of white billionaires who profit off of Black bodies. Well, yes, it's not exactly the same. And I do agree with some of what OJ said, but as an analogy, there are some parallels.
But Terry Mack, this is the problem, though, that I think we have in our society when we do these things and make this an analogy. If we're talking about an NFL football player in a career, if it's 5 years long, okay, then they're out of the NFL. If you are enslaved, you don't get out unless, God willing, you're able to run away.
Unless you're Frederick Douglass and you go on to advise Abraham Lincoln.
And the fact that we can name Frederick Douglass and we can name the few people who were able to get out of chattel slavery and be successful is the exact reason why these things are not the same. There is no parallel that is reasonable to make when you're talking about the travesty and the long-term effects. Again, being in the NFL is an incredibly difficult job on your body. It is no secret that it is disproportionately Black men who are in roles that are significantly harder and wear and tear on the body. And everything that Dominique said about the way that players are selected and chosen and go from team to team is true, but these things are not the same at all in terms of chattel slavery. And I think it is disingenuous and dangerous to get that idea in people's minds, because you know what happens is the opposite effect. People don't look at the NFL and say, geez, this is like slavery. People think and say, well, I guess slavery wasn't that bad if they're comparing to the NFL. Again, you might think that's an absurd thing to say, but you remember, we're not talking about people who think intently and deeply about slavery the way that we might within this conversation. We're talking about casual NFL viewers who might watch Netflix because it's got an NFL player in it and they hear this comment. This is not a good thing for us to do.
Yeah, I have begun as in my olden age to not want to necessarily compare slavery to modern day antics, because I don't think that other communities make the comparisons. And I think there's a reason they don't make the comparisons, is because you have to realize you have a whole generation who wants to forget about slavery, who wants to forget that these things happened and move on. And so if you compare it to football in any way, they do begin to think, like Dr. Oleka suggested, hey, must not have been that bad. Because if you want to forget, it means you don't want to learn about it. It means you don't know much about it. But that is said in a Netflix special about Colin Kaepernick. I don't know. Okay, should we move on, or we want to talk about Colin some more?
I was just going to say, does that mean we can't talk about football anymore because it falls under critical race theory?
I was waiting, Dominique. Either you or Ed. I was waiting.
And they lucky I didn't have anything to do with this series, because I would have taken it a step further. I had them lifting back the lips and checking the teeth. So Dr. Laker would have really been mad at me.
And I also kind of find it interesting that Colin Kaepernick talks about football in the way that he did or does, considering he wanted to be back in so badly. I find a hard time kind of reconciling that. I don't disagree with most of what he says. You
want to be in the entertainment industry.
but they said that was his child. He said that it was his childhood dream. And it's the only thing he ever wanted to do. And he was pushed out unfairly. So I feel like they overcame that objection by showing you he turned down millions of dollars being a baseball pitcher. Because that wasn't what he loved.
Yeah. So then how can you love something that you compare to slavery?
How do you love the Academy Awards when Oscar's so white? I mean, we still want an Oscar, Tammy.
I don't know. Like I said, in my olden age, I'm beginning to think a little differently. I will take a BET award.
Can we have both?
You love to play the game. Like playing the game is one thing, but standing in a room full of people who are, you know, measuring the length of your arm and, you know, the size of your leg and all that sort of stuff. There's a dehumanizing aspect to that. And you don't have to like that. I mean, playing the game is one thing. You don't have to like all the elements of the sport.
Right. And also, Tammy, he could have been like, let me play this game, make enough money, and get together with a couple other guys and buy a team. You know, he could have had a bigger vision.
And take a knee.
Yeah. I would like to see that vision. I have always thought in my mind that Colin Kaepernick would be a part of the NFL in some way in the future. I have not counted him out of being a part of the NFL at all. And I do see great things for him in the NFL, just not today and not 5 years from today. But I do see something big happening for Colin Kaepernick in the NFL. I don't think it's over. I just don't. I think anything is possible. And we thank him for his Netflix documentary, or rather film series. We're going to take a quick break.